originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello and welcome again to the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. I am delighted, really delighted to introduce you to our guest, someone whom I have been anxiously waiting to be on this podcast. Someone who has been fortunate to have experienced so much of life's journey, has so much wisdom to be able to share with us. I love this because I get to learn from people like our guest today. And I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. Through his journey, how his journey of life truly has impacted so many lives of so many people that he may not even understand or know or can appreciate how many lives he's impacted. A journey that led him from when he was a young child to start his own newspaper, one that led him to play sports and earn a college scholarship, which we're going to talk about, a journey that eventually propelled him into the Navy and eventually into a professional career into the private sector. But I think even more important that I want my audience members to know is that this journey of our guest today is rooted in the Christian faith, a deep dependence on Jesus, and one that is unquestionably given him a servant-oriented heart. So before I introduce my guest, I'd like to share a quote that I feel embodies this man, and one that I think will give the audience a good idea of just the type of person he is, at least from my perspective. Your rewards in life will be in direct proportion to the value of your service towards others. I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Drew Hamilton. Drew, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that introduction, and congratulations on your success with your company and your beautiful family.
Oh, thank you.
I have the fortune to know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've known Drew. I've known you for probably 8 to 10 years. I don't know exactly what, but 8 to 10 years. And first met you when I was coaching with your son-in-law, my good friend John, when we were coaching. I think that was around the first time we met, your granddaughters in soccer.
Correct. Yeah.
which has been one of my true passions, just coaching children. I always said if there was something I could do in an alternative life, which I may ask you a question on a little bit later, is what would it be? And I think I'd want to be like a sports coach or a coach at school or something.
I get it.
It's just, that's rewarding. So, well, hey, Drew, again, thanks for coming on. What I thought we'd start off with is just for the audience's benefit, tell the audience a little bit about who Drew Hamilton is. Where were you born? Where were you raised? What was life like as a young child? And then we'll go from there.
Well, Matt, I suspect I'm the oldest guest you've ever had on here. I was born in Bloomington, Indiana in 1940, just before World War II.
Okay.
And when my dad had to go into the Navy during the war, my mother moved us to Lake Hamilton, Florida, which is a small town in central Florida. And her mother lived there along with two of her sisters, and she wanted help raising my brother and I. Our family consisted of my brother and me, and later, 8 years later, I had a sister who came along, and we grew up in the small town of Lake Hamilton, Florida. So,
where is that at, Lake Hamilton, Florida?
Well, you know where Disney World is. Everybody knows.
Sure.
Actually, when I was in 7th grade, we moved to Haines City, Florida, which is about 5 miles north of Lake Hamilton, and that's just about 15 miles south of Disney World.
Yeah.
Below Kissimmee and near Winter Haven, Lakeland, right in the heart of Florida.
Yeah, right there. Okay. Yeah, I know Haines City, so that makes sense. And just for clarification, Drew Hamilton, Lake Hamilton, did they know that you were moving there? I mean, they knew that they had someone special come there to name that city, that lake?
No connection. They had two lakes there, Big Lake Hamilton and Little Lake Hamilton. We swam in both of them, but neither was anything
connected to the family. Okay. All right, Drew. So you strike me as someone and I could be wrong, but you strike me as someone from an early age had a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do with your life. And I mentioned when I was introducing you with our podcast viewers that as a young boy, you started a newspaper. So, I mean, there's not many, young men or women who have the entrepreneurial spirit that early in their life. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when you grow up in a small town and you know everybody and you just get on your bike and ride around during the day, you go and come home at lunchtime and dinner time. So we knew everybody. And my brother and I just decided that, talking to my mother, that, gosh, we ought to just start a newspaper because everybody in town liked to know what everybody else was doing. Yeah. And so we started a one-page newspaper that we charged $0.05 a week. And we delivered it 5 days a week. And every night my mother would type up the news. And we even got some ads for 10 cents a week that local companies put in. And then we delivered it on bicycles. And our cousin, my cousin was my age, he was our reporter and he helped deliver the papers. And we did this because we had nothing else to do one summer. And it got so popular and it just grew, and we got written up in the local newspapers and the Tampa newspaper and the Orlando newspaper, and they took our pictures, and so it was a big deal. But we didn't make a lot of money, enough to buy a bicycle.
Yeah. Well, hey, you could buy a bicycle back then for what, $1 or a couple of dollars, right? I mean, yeah, but that's incredible. You just given me an idea. Like I think we're gonna rip away all the video games from the kids today, and we're gonna make them go out and figure out how they can go out and earn a nickel or a dime. Because that's real teaching right there.
Exactly. We had none of that back when I was growing up. We played outside all day.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. My wife and I and our family, we moved to where we live now. We moved there about 6 years ago, and we moved there with purpose and forethought because we back up to a big 200-acre farm. We're like, move there so the kids can play outside and roam outside every day. And they did that for a good year and a half, or so every day. But everyday life today, with the tug of war of life and all the things and technologies push and pull, and it they don't get to enjoy the outdoors as much as they did. But that's pretty amazing, incredible that you did that. So thanks for sharing.
All we had.
Yeah, that's all you had. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned your mom a couple of times. Talk to me about just if you think back about just some of the things that you learned from your mother, or your parents, but your mother in general, or specifically, what type of things did she impart upon you that you've carried with you in your life and how you've led your life? Well,
I would think, first of all, my mother worked in the post office in our little town, and another town nearby. She filled in when people were out in the post office. Yeah. And my dad was also worked in the post office in Haines City when he came down after the war. And but my parents, and mother in particular, because she was the one that was around most of the time, she taught me, that certainly be fair, she was not a disciplinarian, but you didn't want to do anything wrong, because back in those days, and nowadays you would get arrested for it. But there was a little bush in the backyard, and if we did something wrong, she'd say, "Go cut a little limb," and she'd take the little switch. She'd make a little switch. Oh yeah, we'd get switches. But she was a wonderful lady. But she would give you the shirt off her back, and sometimes she'd give it when she didn't have it. And I learned to be a giving person, I guess, and give back to others from her. Yeah, I could see that. And I think our audience is going to learn a lot about that today. So thanks for sharing. So talk to me about, the newspaper, what age was that again? I was 8 years old, and my brother was 10. And we did it probably for a little less than a year. Okay. And then we were in school, and we didn't have time to do it. So yeah. It took up school and everything. So talk to me about sport, because I know you had this great, career in sports for college, but before college, before we get there, just talk to me about how did you get involved in sports when you were younger, and what led you into that? Well, first of all, I don't think I had such a great career, but when I was little in Lake Hamilton, we played ball all day, every day. We didn't have Little League sports then. In fact, until I was 12 years old, they didn't even have Little League baseball, certainly no football and no basketball. So everything was just get a game up and choose up sides.
Which
and
is
play.
The best. That's really the best.
We'd go out every day, and if I didn't have anybody to play with, I'd take my baseball and glove, which was my most favorite sport at that time, at that young age, was baseball. And I remember throwing baseballs against our steps, and when they come back, I'd pretend I was catching it and playing. I knew every major league team and every player on the team and their batting average, because it was in the paper every morning, and there weren't that many teams. There were 8 in each league. Yeah. So I was an American League fan and a New York Yankee fan, but I just played baseball, and then when we got in school, we would have, basketball, and we didn't play football because they didn't have it in school till you got into the 7th and 8th grades.
Yeah. You played sports, different sports, it sounds like, growing up. Then as you went into high school, and I know eventually basketball became your focus.
It did, yeah.
So tell me about that journey, your athletics journey to kind of focus on basketball, and then eventually from high school going into college. And I think there's an interesting story with someone who's near and dear to my heart, because I went to Florida State University, but I won't spoil it who I'm talking about yet, but just talk about that journey from high school, getting recruited into college.
Through high school, I did well in all the sports, but basketball at that time was my number one sport. And when I graduated, or was my senior year, I wanted to go to the University of Florida. Please forgive me, but I was a Florida fan all my life, and Florida kind of indicated they might give me a scholarship, but then they didn't. And FSU had offered me a scholarship, and I had turned that down because I thought Florida was going to give me one. And then I decided to go to FSU, and my coach called him, and then he called me back and said they just signed another guard, and they don't need you now. But my high school football coach had a connection at a small junior college in South Georgia College, and he knew the athletic director there, a guy you may know named Bobby Bowden.
Yeah.
And, so he called him, and they worked things out. And so I went there for 2 years to play basketball.
That's
Had
great.
A really good career there. But
well, so you were there for 2 years, and then you went on.
Well, yeah.
To transfer out of there, right? Well, it was a junior college, so you were there for 2 years, and then where did you go after that?
Well, before we do that, I wanted to mention Bobby Bowden.
Okay.
I always like to tell people Bobby Bowden gave me my first scholarship.
That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive.
Director. He was the one that gave me the scholarship to play basketball. And then after the first year, they had football. He was also the football coach, and they dropped football. And he went to Howard College, which is Samford in Birmingham today. Yeah. And they won the small college national championship. And as you know, he later went to FSU as an assistant, and then to West Virginia and back to FSU. Yeah. But quite a man.
What a great man.
I used to go to his, he lived on campus in the dorm. And on Sunday nights, we would go over there, and he would have a Bible study. And his wife, Ann, would make sandwiches for us. And his little kids, I remember crawling around on the floor. And I remember one of them was Tommy Bowden, who later became the coach at Clemson.
That's right.
He must have been 2 or 3 or 4. I'm not sure exactly. He was young. A few years ago, I ran into him at the beach. We were on vacation and happened to rent a house near him. And he and I got to talking, and I told him the story about his dad. And he called his dad, who was later in years, and his dad said, I remember him, and mentioned a little redheaded kid that played basketball.
That's unbelievable.
And so what a memory Bobby Bowden had.
Oh, he did. And I think I may have told you the story where only a couple of times I had the opportunity to really meet him in a personal way. And he remembered me from before when I saw him at the golf course a golf course. It was in Destin, Florida, Kelly Plantation. And it was, I couldn't believe that he remembered me. Out of all the people, he didn't have any reason to remember me. I didn't play sports, with him. But everybody said that he had a mind like an elephant. But I'll tell you what, even more so, he had faith like none other.
Yes, I mean, he did.
He was a truly remarkable man that impacted so many people's lives, and obviously he had an impact on you.
He did, and then the first person that ever gave me Bible study was Bobby Bowden.
Wow!
So quite a guy, and I've never forgotten him. Yeah.
That's great. Well, so you leave junior college. Where do you go next?
Yeah, well, at that time, you have to understand, this was back in the about 1960, and there weren't as many colleges around that had basketball teams. I mean, there were a lot of small colleges, and I was getting scholarship offers from mostly small colleges like Georgia Southern and Valdosta State, and I wanted to go. Obviously, FSU didn't offer me a scholarship, and I wanted to go to a major college, so Georgia had said they were going to give me a scholarship, and we were waiting on the recruiter to come down and sign me, and turns out he never came. So I just assumed as a young kid, I didn't know that they weren't going to give me a scholarship, and it turns out that this guy died in the bathtub, and they didn't find him for a week, and the basketball coach thought he was coming down on a recruiting tour to sign me, and they didn't know. They didn't find him for a week. So it all just kind of fell through, and they called me and said, if you come up here and make the team, then we'll give you a scholarship. And so I decided I was going to Georgia because I wanted to go where there was a major football team and big school. And Georgia was not very good in basketball at the time. So I went up to Georgia and made the basketball team. I was supposed to be on the starting lineup for our first game, and they took the pictures and everything, and then the game was the next day. So I went to the coach and said, okay, now I want to get my scholarship. And he said, well, we don't have any available. So you can play this year, and we'll give you one next year. And I said, well, no. We didn't have much money. Now, my dad had to borrow money to help send me to school, and I worked in the summers. But when Georgia told me that, I told the coach that I wasn't going to do that. It was the young age, and, I can look back on it and wish I'd handled it different. But I told him either you're going to do what you told me to do and give me a scholarship, or I'm not going to play. So turns out that he told me he wanted to keep me on the team, but he just didn't have a scholarship. He was actually a PE teacher, and they didn't have it. His basketball coach at the time was a PE teacher at Georgia, but who also doubled as the head basketball coach. And so anyway, I stuck to my word, and I told him I wasn't going to play if he didn't give me a scholarship, and he didn't have one. So
to give you,
instead of me being mature enough to look at it rationally, I said, no, you didn't do what you said.
Right.
So I'm not going to play. So I gave up my basketball career at that point, and enjoyed my life in college. And, played all the intramural sports, and was actually my senior year I was given a medal as the outstanding intramural athlete at Georgia. I played through the fraternity. I played all the sports. So that was the end of my college basketball career. But after I got out of college, I played with a group of guys that were college basketball players at the time. And we had a semi-pro team that we traveled all around to Macon and Columbus and other
Remarkable.
cities.
Wow, I didn't know that.
We played basketball, and we had a sponsor that paid for our
travels,
but just for fun. I was working at the time, so.
Yeah, but I mean, what a remarkable journey from high school to being recruited by what I consider, college athletic royalty and Bobby Bowden to where you were at, that then, God got to speak into you. You were exposed to your first set of Bible studies. Then, you go to Georgia thinking you're going to go on scholarship. You don't get the scholarship, disappointing, but you finish your college career, and then after college, talk to us a little bit about how you got into the military. How does that come into play?
Well, Matt, when I graduated in college, it was 1962, and they had a draft. And every time you would go apply for a job, the first question was, what's your draft status? And mine was, of course, 1A, which is they're going to draft you. And they would all tell you, go get your military out of the way and then come back, because if I went to work for them and I got drafted, they had to pay me. They had to keep my job open.
Yeah.
So I decided I would just do that. And a friend of mine and I drove down to Macon, where the recruiting offices were. And as I went down there, I had no idea what branch of the service I was going in. But they were all in one little shopping center, and they had Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. And I looked at and I was going to go to officer school. I knew that. And I looked at the uniforms, and I thought the Navy officer uniforms were by far the best looking uniforms.
So that's how you chose.
I opted to join the Navy and go
to
Navy officer school, which was in Newport, Rhode Island. And that's where I went after college to officer school.
So talk about, though, your career in the Navy, and ultimately, as I understand it, you became what back then I think was known as Frogman, but which today is known as Navy SEALs. But what today they've morphed into what the Navy SEALs are. But I think the audience would really appreciate hearing that story and learning from that journey of yours.
Okay, well, while you're in officer school, the Navy comes around and they make presentations about different things you can go do. The first day they came, it was submarines. The next day, it was Navy flight school, both of which I said, oh, that's the one I want to do. And the next day, oh, that's the one I want to do. Well, the third day, they came around and they were recruiting for an underwater demolition team, which is called UDT. And I grew up in Florida, swimming in lakes all my life, and I was a good swimmer. And I said, well, I think that's what I want to do. So I did. I volunteered, and you had to take tests. You had to swim a certain distance in a certain time. You had to do pull-ups, push-ups. Then they put you down in a big hard hat like diving, and they put you down in the ocean. They took you out in the ocean and put you down in there. You had to go down, I think we were down like 40 feet, but it had the helmet that had the air on it.
Yeah, on the top.
They wanted to see if you were claustrophobic. And if you passed that test, then they put you in a chamber that they could lower the pressure down, because you had to see if you could go down. If you can go down, at the time they told us, if you can go down 60 feet, you can go down as far as you need to go. And they took us down, and it was amazing the number of people whose teeth fillings popped out, and
really?
A lot of people can't do the pressure. So once you pass that test, then you just wait until you graduate from officer school and you get your orders. And I got my orders to go to UDT school, which was in Little Creek, Virginia. Now, just to clarify, you mentioned Frogman. Well, originally, back during World War II, when things got started, they were called Frogmen.
Yeah.
Then they morphed to calling them UDT, which is what they were, underwater demolition, which were really, they taught you to blow up. The original was the Japanese were putting obstacles in the water, so when we were landing our troops and our tanks, we would run into these obstacles, and we'd be out in the water, the people that they're trying to land, and the Japanese would be shooting at them. So they formed the Frogmen UDT to go in ahead of the landings and blow up all these obstacles, and they're, without getting too deep into it, that was basically what the UDT was. And so when we went to school, it was the same as what is now Navy SEAL training. We go through Hell Week, and then the training they teach you about diving and about explosives. You have to learn how to waterproof explosives and do it. But anyway, so while the Navy SEALs started about a year before I went into the Navy, and they were looking for Navy officers at the time. And so they recruited from our class and got some Navy officers, which they moved into the SEALs, which had just started, and they were in Coronado, California. So I ended up out there and going through training. But after I'd been in the Navy for I was there about a year and almost a year and a half. And I decided I wanted to make the Navy a career because I was an officer. By this time, I was starting as an ensign. I was lieutenant junior grade, which is a 02, officer level 2.
Yeah.
And so I talked to my commanding officer, and he said, well, if you want to make the Navy a career and you want to progress through the Navy, you need to get on a ship. I said, fine with me. And so next thing I know, they gave me orders to a Navy destroyer in Mayport, Florida, which is Jacksonville.
Wow.
And so I spent my last year on a Navy ship, and I had a captain that made me say, I'm not making the Navy a career.
Yeah, right.
After my time was up, I decided to get out of the Navy.
That's remarkable. I mean, I'm sure we could talk about this for a long time with just the experience and the lessons that you learned. One or two things, just to share with the audience, one or two things that when you look back on your naval career and all the things that you did and were exposed to and people that you learned from, what did you learn most about leadership and helping lead men and women, good or bad, from the Navy?
Well, the one thing that would stand out definitely was training. The Navy was, and you know, going through the training I went through, there, you know, the main thing is just train. They want to tell you what they're going to tell you, then they tell you what they told you, and you better know it.
You better know it. Yeah.
You train over and over. It seems to me like every day we were out training, and so one thing you learn about leadership is that if you train your people right, you know, the first time, then they'll know how to do the job and they'll do it. So I think training in the Navy, and the Navy had a different kind of leadership. Military leadership, I won't say the Navy, is a little different than the kind you and I ended up in the business world. Not always, but military leadership is a lot more by fear, authoritative than I'm sure you do and I did in my company.
Sure.
Because in the military, you tell somebody to do it, they better do it.
Better do it, right?
They don't always do that in the business world.
Rank means everything, and if you're out of rank or you're out of line,
exactly,
you're getting.
And one of the reasons I didn't want to stay in the Navy was because they promoted you based on longevity, not on how good you were. And the very first thing I asked when I started interviewing after the Navy was, do you promote on merit or do you promote on seniority?
Yeah.
And if anybody said seniority, that was not a company I was going to join.
Well, that shows the kind of leader you are, and how you understand that. Well, that's great. So there's so much more I want to cover. We're out of time today for this episode, but I want to pick back up on the next episode, and I want to lead into your professional career as you left the Navy. When did your professional career, all the great things that you accomplished at a Fortune 500 company, and then we'll learn about your family and some other things, you know, since you've been retired. So, Drew, thank you for joining us today. To all of our subscribers and listeners out in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next episode, I pray that our daily journeys are filled with opportunity to lift others up and inspire one another as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks again, guys. Take care.